I recently saw an image that I could not stop thinking about. A middle-aged Hollywood actor showing up at a Trump gala where the betting price was several $1,000s. It was actually called the Trumpets Gala. Not only did he pay all of that money to sit in the room, but he showed off his style, and it was a jacket covered in his movies. Movies that have gone straight to streaming or had a low-budget theatrical release. But for this actor, this was the highlight of his year, because former Hollywood star Kevin Sorbo has cast himself in the role of derided actor saving Hollywood from itself. And what's fascinating to me, this is not the first time that he has sewn the inside of his jacket lining with something super self-reflective. He also showed up at CPAC with a jacket lined with all of his tweets. So he is as equally proud of his movies as he is his tweets, which says a lot about the state of Kevin Sorbo. Kevin Sorbo's biography from Hollywood star to outcast may seem random, but for Sorbo, it is quite intentional.
Gorgeous hair to his bulging biceps, Kevin Sorbo was the perfect embodiment of Hercules in the 90s Smash TV series.
Fear's government's favorite weapon.
Say, look, there's a difference between man and the boys and girls. There's a difference between male and female.
It's not about politics or religion. I don't push that anybody's.
Sorbo played the lead role in the most watched syndicated television series in the world in the mid-1990s, Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, and has more than 90 movies and TV shows to his credit. But today, the Minnesota native and outspoken Christian is largely a Hollywood outcast, an accolade Sorbo holds dear. For more than 10 years now, Sorbo has been shining the light of Christ in his independently produced films to offer hope and eternal redemption to those disillusioned by the world's pursuit of happiness and contentment. I think it says a lot of yourself if you are showing up at CPAC with a jacket lined with your tweets that you also think your movies are offering hope, because your Twitter is quite the opposite of offering hope. But anyway, Kevin's path is not a mistake. His career has closely tracked the polarization of the country that he claims to hold so dear. So let's start at the beginning. His Hollywood career launched with Hercules, and I only know about Hercules from Kevin Sorbo's biography. He also claims that he was always interested in acting. From 11 years old, he saw a play, he wanted to be an actor, but he's from Minnesota, and he's not a Nepo baby, which I do admire that. And he said he was cast in a stroke of luck. He was walking down the street in Italy and someone cast him to walk the runway and model, and from there he got cast in Hercules. And Hercules was extremely popular in the 90s, but I'm not a 90s kid. I never watched it, and I've never seen reruns of it. So I don't know anything about Hercules or the quality of the show or if it's even that good. And unlike Friends, I've never seen reruns of it at the hair salon, so I'm not really sure what to think of the show. After Hercules, Sorbo's career kind of panned out. He seems to float aimlessly in the Hollywood landscape, which is not uncommon for TV actors who often fail to translate well to film. And Kevin Sorbo likes to claim that the reason his career petered out is that Hollywood canceled him. But from his own interviews, you can tell he wasn't so much canceled in the early 2000s or the late 2000s as just not interested in playing the games of the industry. I'm not saying the games of the industry are good or bad. I'm not saying anything about the industry. I'm just saying he was not interested in playing those games. I have to admire, as I've said, he's not a Nepo baby. He lucked into his career and he struggled with getting the next gig post Hercules. In 2014, he spoke with a Vice journalist. My favorite thing about this interview is it is incredibly honest, unlike the 2023 or 2024, I should say, Kevin Sorbo. He told the journalist, "I'm busy doing movies nobody sees, but I'm still busy." He lays out where he rubs Hollywood wrong. He says, "I actually met with Will Ferrell for the first Anchorman that they did. It's a small part. I figured I had it. It was only 2 days of work, and what does he do? Will Ferrell books one of his best friends, Vince Vaughn. He didn't need that role. They bring in Vince to work a couple days on it, and I can't compete with that. These guys, Ben Stiller likes to use the same guys over and over again. Seth Rogen does too. It's hard to break into these frats. They get really successful and just use the same guys over and over again." The journalist replies, "Well, you sound a little disenchanted." "I don't know about disenchanted. I still love the business. I still love being on set. I still love to work. I appreciate when people call me to work. Would I like to get some bigger movies? Of course I would. Of course I would. I know Kevin Costner, Could he put me in one of his movies? He probably could. But here's the thing, I don't put myself out there, so if you're out of sight, you're out of mind." Which is an incredibly honest thing for an actor to say, that he's not playing the room to get into roles. But instead of just being honest, he veers into political territory pretty quickly in this interview. What's interesting to me is he's speaking to Vice, and of course Vice is horrified. The journalist at Vice is horrified by his comments. But as I read his comments, I almost laughed to myself because this is the exact kind of language that I grew up hearing, and it's not that unusual to hear anybody my dad's age, Kevin Sorbo is just a couple years younger than my dad. And evangelical circles talk like this. So I do want to warn you, it's pretty Islamophobic, it's pretty horrible, but it was very common language in evangelical circles in the 2010s. Here is the whole quote. The whole thing about Obama, he's never run anything in his life. He's never run any kind of business in his life, ever. He was a community organizer, whatever that means. He was raised as a true Marxist. He was raised that way. His stepfather was a true Marxist. He lived in Indonesia for a very long time. He is certainly a very hardcore socialist. There's no question about him. So to me, it's like, well, okay, show me where communism has worked. I went to Moscow. I was just there for a week after Christmas, and good Lord, after 100 years of communism, that country's got a long way to go. It's pretty sad. The journalist replies, well, going off your Facebook page, you seem to be fascinated with Muslims right now. Well, I think they're fascinated with us. They want to kill everybody. These guys are still living in the dark ages. I don't see Christians strapping bombs to themselves and going into churches and buses and cafes and blowing up innocent women and children. But these guys do it. They would cut off your head just as quick as they'd cut my head off. They don't care because you're not a Muslim. The interviewer rightfully then pushes back on this hateful dialogue. In a few paragraphs, he asks Sorbo, are you a pariah? Well, I still get invited to things, probably not all of the things, but I don't care. I would love to have discussions with some of the more outspoken liberals and just say, why are you so angry? Why can't we have a discussion? A lot of times when I do get into discussions on a set with some people, they don't deal with facts. They deal with mirages and anger and hatred. This interview is incredibly tone deaf because he spews such hatred for a group of individuals for their religion. Then he turns around and claims that liberals are the angry ones that don't deal with facts and just deal with anger and hatred. And what's sad and ironic is he will never realize that he is spewing hatred and then claiming other people are the hateful ones. While Sorbo was busy complaining about being a Hollywood pariah, he was also busy booking the biggest role of his Christian breakout career. The role of the atheist philosopher professor in the breakout Christian film God's Not Dead. And yes, we will get into God's Not Dead right now. So I have a lot of thoughts on God's Not Dead. God's Not Dead was not just a movie, but it was an affirmation that everything the evangelical world held dear. God's Not Dead released in the era when evangelicals were most afraid of politicians, they were most afraid of the culture, and they were most afraid of being pariahs. Barack Obama's popularity and the cultural hold of liberalism and the push towards gay marriage and all of the neoliberal energy of the 2010s was something that the Republican Party and evangelicals could not stand or even match in energy. I think it's also important to note that before Donald Trump, there was no politician who evangelicals so aligned with. There was no politician that they felt was as much as a pariah as evangelicals cast themselves out to be. To be evangelical in the 2000s was to be separate. It was to be loud and isolated. To be evangelical meant to affirm your own biases as your religious freedom. To be hateful was a loving form of control. To be afraid of anything other was an affirmation of your core beliefs. Donald Trump embodies that evangelical cultural mindset of eternal persecution. He's a figure so reviled, so hated, so misunderstood by the culture that he will never be accepted as the norm. For the evangelical, this was their entire cultural stance of the 2000s. And it was in this cultural landscape that God's Not Dead marched itself in. The film was a perfect mix of evangelical stereotypes of the other and religious celebrities. You have the Robertsons from Duck Dynasty who were featured as a cameo. The journalist who interviews them is an angry liberal, condescending to everything in Christian culture. The title was, of course, taken directly from a Newsboys songs, and the Newsboys concert plays a key role in the film storyline. And then you look at the list of endorsements for the movie. The Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a political lobbyist group. How many political lobbyists endorse movies that you go to see? The American Heritage Girls, which is the American Girl dolls Christian version. The Faith-Driven Consumer, which if you look at consumer product reviews, you now have a Christian consumer product review organization. The Denison Forum on Truth and Culture. The Dove Foundation, the Dove Foundation, which is the Christian version of the Academy Awards. And of course, they are going to endorse this movie. So as you can see, this movie carried the banner for evangelical culture. And if you don't understand that evangelical culture creates its own silos. It creates its own categories of culture with political lobbying groups, their own girl dolls, their own movie awards. They're all out here creating their own separate culture, and God's Not Dead was the banner for that. Do you ever go to the movies on the endorsement of a non-profit religious lobbyist? No. But the evangelical family of those 2014 who absolutely did go to the movies because Focus on the Family told them to, turned out in droves to watch God's Not Dead. One key moment as the film reaches its religious crescendo is a call to action. Have you ever gone to the movies and had to text someone because the movie told you to? Well, you're not evangelical. So, or you didn't grow up evangelical, as I say. In the middle, at the end of the movie, in the middle of this Newsboys concert, the audience and the movie audience is instructed to get out your phone and text God's Not Dead to 10 people as a way to let them know that you believe God's not dead. So I did not own a phone at the time. I borrowed my dad's phone because I went with a group of friends, and my dad always had a flip phone, or he didn't always. He had a flip phone at the time. So he hands me his flip phone. He's like, text me if you need anything. So I pulled out his flip phone in the middle of the theater and I texted everyone in the contacts of my dad's phone that God's not dead. Even though everyone in the contacts of my dad's phone went to church with us on Sunday, they knew me. They knew that I believed in this. It felt important to announce, despite the fact that these people knew me, that I too believed that God's not dead. And not only did I believe that God's not dead, I was uber proud of my beliefs. God's Not Dead affirmed the insular beliefs of our Christian culture. It made it cool to listen to Christian music and to make fun of college atheists and to believe the world was inherently anti-Christian. So yes, the film used characters instead of character. It did get critiques for this. Evangelical Michael Gerson wrote, "The main problem with God's Not Dead is not its cosmology or ethics, but its anthropology. It assumes that human beings are made out of cardboard. Academics are arrogant and cruel. Liberal bloggers are preening and snarky. Unbelievers disbelieve because of personal demons. It is characterization by caricature." But for the average evangelical watching God's Not Dead and texting everyone they knew and singing to Newsboys, the caricatures were all they knew of anyone outside of their evangelical culture. They saw the world as a scary place full of atheist professors and hateful college campuses and godless Chinese communists and teenage Muslims who would be violently abused by their families when they converted to evangelicalism. The evangelical world did not see these plots, which were all true. Everything I just said is a real plot in God's Not Dead. They didn't see them as wildly exaggerated or offensive. They didn't see them as made up, but as very real beliefs about their world at large. God's Not Dead established for the culture at large the very real lines that we had grown up believing. There were two worlds, those with us and those against us. Critics panned God's Not Dead. The evangelical world loved it. Every critical review affirmed that bias. Hollywood hates our movies because Hollywood hates our values. They hate our values because they hate us. It eventually spawned an entire franchise of God's Not Dead movies and a whole direct-to-consumer streaming service of PureFlix, which launched and became successful because of all the money it made from God's Not Dead. In 2019, Vox wrote, "That's what's so significant about the success of PureFlix and God's Not Dead. The film heralded a future, one that has since arrived, where culture is fully bifurcated, where the streaming services you subscribe to double as markers of your identity, and where selecting the inspirational Christian option means making a proclamation about your politics. If talking and arguing about art is a way of extending its life, of giving it importance, that's a problem, because siloed art is nearly impossible to talk and argue about from a variety of perspectives. Instead, it's all seen from one perspective. That means there's no incentive to make any art that doesn't reinforce your bias. The corner PureFlix has carved out for itself reflects popular culture's increasing fragmentation among ideological lines. The implications of that are bleak." It's crazy that came out in 2019 and it's just become more and more true. I'm not denying that God's Not Dead made money. It made a ton of money and launched an entire new genre of streaming. Before God's Not Dead, shelves were lined at Christian bookstores with direct-to-DVD movies, and you could even order some Christian movies in catalogs. After God's Not Dead, Christian movies suddenly had a new life in the theaters and on streaming services. Suddenly, Kevin Sorbo wasn't stuck to acting in roles like What If?, a 2011 straight-to-DVD movie that I watched as a child. And even as a child, I knew it was bad. And if you're not on PureFlix's website looking through Kevin Sorbo's biography, you would have never heard of it, and you would have never watched it, and you're better for it. Instead, Sorbo can now take the payroll that God's Not Dead provided and turn that cash into a lucrative new career, casting himself as a Hollywood pariah with a political agenda. Evangelical audiences know and trust Sorbo from his role in God's Not Dead. It's a key part of his identity, and it plays a role in his new side gig as a Trump acolyte. Sorbo can affirm to evangelicals they are hated, that Donald Trump is hated like them, and that being canceled by Hollywood is actually a good thing. That's why we get news headlines on Fox and Friends where Sorbo outlines his grievances with the liberal left. Sorbo prides himself as a Hollywood antithesis. He parades his critically list of panned movies as his magnum opus, eschewing any praise from a critic. At the same time, he froths at the mouth at the dim view Hollywood takes on him, lambasting cancel culture as the problem. His calling card is a Hollywood pariah. If Hollywood is so evil, so repugnant, if it's a place to hate and despise, why are you so desperate to be so uncanceled? Why are you desperate for Hollywood to cast you and like you again? Because Sorbo doesn't care about actually being accepted by Hollywood. He cares about enforcing his beliefs on Hollywood and the culture at large. Sorbo doesn't make movies because he's good at acting. I'm not gonna say if he's a good actor or not, because I'm not a I don't act, I don't know. He doesn't make movies because he's good at acting, or because anyone will watch his movies. Sorbo makes movies because he sees them as an attack in the war he's waging on Hollywood. He told Decision Magazine last year, Hollywood is winning the culture war right now, and we've got to do something about that by putting movies out there with a positive message about hope and love and faith and redemption, because Hollywood is not doing it. Unfortunately for Kevin Sorbo and PureFlix and the rest of the Christian entertainment industry, Hollywood has never been waging a war against them. Movies aren't coming out as part of a culture war strategy. Movies come out because audiences want to watch them. As Christian film critic Alyssa Wilkinson wrote, audiences shouldn't expect to leave the theater comfortable. Movies should change our lives and expand our imagination. If it just reinforces our prejudices and lines in the sand, then it's just a feature-length infomercial. Writing this script actually made me feel really bad for Kevin Sorbo. His career trajectory was never good after Hercules, but to see a modestly successful actor fall into a cultural tailspin is kind of sad. What makes it even more sad is to see Sorbo and the Christian film industry fall into that tailspin together, because Christian film could be good instead of the insulated persecution complex it has become. Unfortunately, I don't see Kevin Sorbo or the Christian film industry climbing out of the cultural hole that it's made of itself, because it exists in an echo chamber where Donald Trump is aggrieved, an election was stolen, and Hollywood hates them. And therefore, they must keep making movies and creating culture that affirms all of their beliefs. And that is why we will see Kevin Sorbo continuing to show up on the red carpets with jackets lined with his tweets and movies, instead of actually making movies that are fun to watch or made for anyone who is not a Trump voter. Anyway, thanks for watching. I have tons of sources that I used in this video. They're linked all below. To support more content like this, please subscribe to my channel. You can check out my Substack. I also have my Instagram and TikTok linked below, as well as my newsletter where I drop all sorts of random chatty thoughts. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed not being on camera, which is not often, but I just needed to make a video, and the best way to do it was to write a script and record it, even if that meant not showing my face. So I hope you liked a different kind of video that I made today, and I'll see you guys next time. See ya.